Alex, thank you for your time today. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, Jim, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So this you just mentioned is your second ever interview. This must be like a whole new world for you. You've decided to publish your first game by designing it with Jamey Stegmaier. That's a one way to start in the hobby, right?
Yeah, it's definitely jumping in the deep end. I've designed a couple games, but nothing's ever been published. And yeah, jumping in with Jamey, it's been intense. Not suddenly like I have 50,000 Twitter followers or anything like that, but it's been a big increase of attention.
I could imagine. Like normally people sort of talk about phones blowing up when things like happen. Did you experience moments like that? We kind of got back to your phone and it was like boom, 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 boom. Did you have that moment?
Yes, yeah, I really did. It's like I had to tell my family about it, but as far as friends and things like that, like everyone wanted to say congratulations. And
That's awesome. So have you managed to ditch all your old friends now and just let them know, look, I don't need you anymore. I'm now with this higher circle. You're the Reds. I'm now with the Golds.
no, I've tried to avoid doing that. So far, we'll see. Uh, I don't have conventions right now, so it's not like I can have all of my cool new friends to hang out with me anyway.
Of course, yeah. And just to reiterate, that totally inferred that I was suggesting you started off a red. That wasn't my intention.
Oh, I did. I think I did.
People that wouldn't have read the book will have no idea what we're talking about. And I'm very conscious of not giving any plot spoilers. I know you and Jamey are keen not to ruin what the book is all about, but obviously it's quite difficult to not talk about it too much because this is a board game based on a book, and that doesn't happen every single day. It's obviously a new thing for Jamey to work on an IP, a new thing for you to work on working on a board game with someone of the stature of Jamey. Like the whole thing is just new. But what I'm interested for you from your perspective is how does this all work in a world where we're all locked down? Like, does it feel that different? But just because people are connected to you on the phone, or because you're kind of still living your life, doing your thing, are you still kind of in your own little bubble?
Yeah, it's definitely different. Um, I would say, for example, Jamie has one copy of the collector's edition and one copy of the regular edition that we had shipped by parcel from China to have them to talk about, to show pictures and everything. And I've seen them. I saw them once, but I can't like go over and play the games with him. So, and I'm still waiting for my own copy. I have the spot behind me here where there's Wingspan sitting there. I'm saving that spot for Red Rising.
That'd be a cool moment when you finally get to put that there, your first published game, and it's by that point, I guess, out there in the masses and people will know about it, and that's going to be a wonderful feeling. I know you've commented saying you just can't wait for people to get their hands on it. I mean, that's just going to be a thrill for you, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be so exciting. Like I'm excited for the reviews. I'm nervous for the reviews because that's a new thing for me. But I'm really excited for everyone to just get to play this game. I think it's a lot of fun. Jamie thinks it's a lot of fun. Pretty much everyone who's played it has thought it's a lot of fun, and I can't wait for other people to get to enjoy it as well.
About the reviews, have you spoken to Jamey about that? Because I know he's very much, I don't read the reviews. People can say what they want to be, as honest as they want. That's totally fine. Has he tried to encourage you not to read them?
Yeah, he's definitely encouraged me to at least avoid reading them when I'm not in a very good place emotionally.
Yeah, that's a good advice.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky because I also work for Stonemaier Games as the director of sales, and so it's very useful for me to know what to expect, like what are reviewers saying, what's the general feel of our games for reviewers, and also what critiques do they have, because
Sure.
no matter how good a game is, it still has flaws.
Yeah. So if the game doesn't do as well as you hope, as director of sales, are you going to have to fire yourself as co-designer?
Well, I hope not. Um,
It's an interesting dynamic to have these two positions, though, right? As director of sales, it must be about forging relationships with different retailers and distributors and getting an understanding of what is going to make a game successful. Is that a big part of the role?
It is, yeah. So in some companies, the director of sales is also dealing more with the direct to fans, to customer stuff. But because Jamey does that all so much and so well, there was not really that's not part of my director of sales. So it's very much I'm interact with our distributors, our retailers, and then our localization partners.
Mm.
And so yes, trying to understand what's selling, what's interesting for both like the U.S. and other English language market, but also other regions. What is popular here isn't necessarily going to be what does well in Germany or in India or things like that.
Do you see big differences like that geographically? Are there clear divides between what different nations want from their games?
Yeah, there's less than there used to be in. I would say like across Europe, it used to be sort of your Central European market very much wanted Euro games. There's kind of a pushback that's slowly actually disappearing about like conflict and combat in the games in Europe, and Americans traditionally wanted more of the dice rolling Ameritrash games, and that's the same way that those have both like slowly been moving to more of a global variety of games.
Mm.
But what's more common is other countries that have whether it's their population has in general a lower income, or where they have um, like high tariffs or taxes, import taxes, and things like that, where it's much more expensive to get a game into that country than it is to get into the U.S. or the U.K. That they just kind of have to aim for a lower price point game. So something like Tapestry isn't necessarily as easy for them to buy.
Mm. Yeah, sure, that makes sense. So, with your understanding of what makes a game sell, do you think that was beneficial when you then took that director of sales hat off and put your designer hat on and thought, how can I make this game work? Did the learnings from one help the other?
Well, it ended up being just because of timing. It ended up being the other way around. So most of the design of Red Rising happened in 2019. So luckily we got to do a lot of in-person play testing before the pandemic hit, and I didn't start as director of sales until this past fall in September.
Right. Okay. So it helped you get the job, did it?
Uh, yeah, well, that, and I had been working with like Greater Than Games does U.S. fulfillment and warehousing for Stonemaier, and
Mhm.
so I had been working with Jamey at Greater Than Games before that, and we had just been friends. We've been part of the same game group since 2016.
Sure. So the thing I'm interested about with this co-design is Jamey obviously very publicly came out a few years ago now and released a video saying, I really want to make this game. I love the books. I've made the contact with the publishers. They've given me permission to utilize the IP, but I just can't get it to work.
Mhm.
I guess from that video where he reached out to the world, there must have been a bunch of designs that didn't work. Jamey Stegmaier made Wingspan, made Side, well, didn't make Wingspan, but published Wingspan. He couldn't get it to work. All these other people couldn't quite get it to work, and then you turn up and you make it work. Like that's a cool story for you, right? So don't worry, Jamey, you don't know anything about this board game, lark. I'll teach you how to make a game. I mean, it's a cool thing for you to be able to say, yeah, I helped Jamey overcome this hurdle.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was already friends with Jamey when he went through this process. I didn't play any of his prototypes of the old Red Rising. I've never played any of them, but he asked me to watch the video when he put it out because he wanted me to specifically think through. Like we'd done a lot of talking about game theory and things like that at game night, and so he wanted me to watch a video and sort of think about that with him. And so just sort of over the following weeks, we just back and forth had a lot of conversations. He got other prototypes, but because of the epic space opera of the Red Rising books, it's very easy to imagine Red Rising as a game like Twilight Imperium. You
Mm-hmm.
have this big sprawling space game. Whether I guess you could say, well, is it more like Eclipse and more of a Euro, or is it more like Twilight Imperium, more of dice rolling and things like that? But either way, that's what everyone kind of leaned towards of a more overarching arching picture, and that's not exactly a Stonemaier game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not exactly a game that's good for people who aren't into gaming. And one assumption here is that a lot of fans of Red Rising will buy the game because they love the books, but maybe Wingspan would be a really difficult game for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. So at that point, when Jamie said, "Watch this video," I'm interested in your thoughts. Had you read the books? Were you a fan of the books at that point?
I hadn't. So funny story. I had read the first chapter of the first book,
Uh-huh.
um, and after you get about chapter 3 or 4 of the first book, the story changes completely.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I read the first chapter and I was like, I'm not sure this is for me, and I put it down. And so it was only after this that I came back and started reading the books like fully, and from at that point the eyes of a designer, and I love them. Like I have read all 5. I can't wait for the 6th one to come out. But I'd only read a single chapter of the first point, and I was like, I don't get it.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, I've only just been made aware of the books recently now because of what you're doing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I got the books on Friday just gone and just finished book 1 today. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm catching up with you and the rest of the world, and still haven't read the others yet. But I can see where you're coming from because, yeah, that first part of the book, I don't want to go into the spoilers too much. I was sitting there thinking, really? This is the game? This is the world that Jamie was so inspired by? But then, like you said, it switches into this whole other thing. You're thinking, oh, okay, now I see the world that he wants to create. And it's a fascinating world. And I was talking to James about this earlier, so I don't want to cross over with this too much, but I'm interested in your take on how the classes that are created in this world of these 14 colors, that is essentially a mixture of their wealth, upbringing, looks, appeal, but massively limits their abilities in life. If you are a red, you can only do X, and if you're a gold, you can ultimately do whatever you want, but you're still pigeonholed really into Y. And I'm interested in your take on how that really has so many synergies with the world you and I live in today. Because as I read the book, that was the thing that was coming back to me all the time. I was like, this is a commentary on class divide and social design and judgment.
Yeah, no, that's. I think you're absolutely right. It is. One thing I personally really enjoy about sci-fi and fantasy is the ability to take all of these issues and struggles we have in the real world today and sort of take a step back from them and look at them in a different place. We're not talking about, am I racist? Are you racist? We're talking about these other people here who are doing this other thing to these people who don't actually exist, who are, being classist or racist. And yeah, I think it's just a very real take. Like Pierce wants people to see like this is broken, and the ways that is a struggle, and the struggles, how as you get into later books, like even trying to fix it, the problems you run into there, like that is definitely a line throughout. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's great that he's able to let people look at that.
Yeah, definitely. And the world that he's bringing to people as they are exposed with quite an important and powerful message is really fun. So it's like you're being preached to. It's a really easy read. It's a really fun read. There's some weird kind of dialect and a few words that are not immediately easy to come off the tongue as you're starting to enter this world. But once those things go away, like I just said, I just read it over 3 days, and I'm not normally that quick of a reader. I felt like I had a bit of a deadline. I wanted to read it before I spoke to you, but I enjoyed that process, and it was a fun process, and I honestly can't wait to read the next few books. And so it really makes sense to me why you guys wanted to turn this into a game. And it's interesting the world that you have created from this in the game that you've made, because like you said, it could have gone down so many other routes, and it seems to be more about understanding how you can move on in life with all these different positions and trying to balance between them. Is that fair to say? It's hard for me to comment too much because obviously you haven't released a ton about the game yet, but is that kind of what you're going for?
Yeah, I think the game is more abstracted in a lot of ways. It's more of, how would I describe it? You as a player are like the leader of a faction, and you're trying to gather the people who work well together with you, and then send out the people who are more useful as an agent elsewhere, or don't fit well together. Um,
But you're never
and
just on your own faction, right? You want to move up on more
right.
than one. Like if a faction has sort of a score, you're not just focusing on your own faction score, right? You're trying to move up on more than one.
Right, you are, yeah, you're moving up on multiple tracks, and that has to do with Yeah, I would say it's more abstracted than just factions. So I'm a little hesitant to give us too much credit there.
I
But
like the vibe of it though, and I'm
mhm,
intrigued to try it because as I learn more about the game with the rest of the community, it seems to have
mhm,
really fascinating and really exciting mechanics that I'm keen to try. And I spoke to Jamie about this in terms of how you and him were playing fancy realms, and the mechanics in that seem to really spark a way to make this game work. And I love that. I love how one game can lead to the creation of another game that's going to share some core ideas. But in truth, from my limited perspective right now, what I know about Red Rising, it seems to be a completely different game to Fantasy Realms.
yeah, it's. I think if you know Fantasy Realms, you can definitely see the similarity there.
Mm.
But that's like saying, well, I know Agricola, and then I played Viticulture, and well, yeah, there's a similarity there, right? Like they're both worker placement games. They're both set around farming in whatever sense, or making grapes versus actual farming. But there's similarities there, but they're not the same game.
Mm.
And I think that's one really cool thing that we're seeing in our hobby that's true in well science and creative arts just across the board is we're always standing on our shoulders of the people before us. I know of people who say, well, I design games, I don't play any other games. I don't get it. Like there's so much to learn from all of these other games. What did they do well?
Mm.
And we're only getting better and better. Like I don't think we could have made this game without Fantasy Realms
Mm.
being there to show us what was possible in that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's great to learn from the things that are out there, and I love
Mm-hmm.
absorbing stuff from every genre. It's what I do. I asked Jamie this question as well, and I'm very keen to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that games evolve from other games and you kind of take mechanics and core ideas from them, there's going to be new stuff, right? There's going to be new
Mm-hmm.
mechanics. Core mechanics that you and I currently aren't aware of will exist in 5, 10 years' time because
Mm-hmm.
someone came up with them. And I asked Jamie the same question. I'm keen to ask you too. Is that something that you're interested in? Like, I would love to be the guy that comes up with X.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean that would be amazing. Um, and oftentimes the guy who comes up with X first is oftentimes not the best version of that because they're the first version of it. But it's still so exciting. It's exciting to see like having someone else use something in a game that I designed and turn it into something completely new would be an amazing feeling.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. So for you, obviously, you've kind of got this dual hat on. You're a designer and you're the
Mm.
director of sales. What's the next thing for you? Is it a case of pitching more ideas to Jamie? I guess with your Stonemaier employment, you can't go like Elizabeth did and go make a game with somebody else, right? It's with Stonemaier or no one. Is that the case?
It's actually not. So very carefully in my contract when I came on as a Stonemaier employee, Jamie intentionally said that like any game design I do is completely separate for this, whether it's for Stonemaier or for someone else. It's
Oh,
not part of my employment.
that's awesome.
So I do have that freedom. That said, there are a lot of benefits of designing with Stonemaier, working with Jamie. Um, I get to be more involved in the process the entire way. I can part of my workday is like right now is working on things around Red Rising, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um, and also, I personally hate pitching games. The just the process of being like, is this game at the right point that I can go show it to publishers? And now I have to go show it to a publisher, and there's this weird process at that point. Like one really cool thing about Red Rising is Stonemaier was publishing it. Like I didn't have to worry about that entire side of the process,
Sure.
and that's a huge benefit. So um, I will say that Jamie and I have talked about some other things. We're not they're not anywhere near like me being able to say, hey, yes, we're designing or like I am designing and publishing another game for Stonemaier even, but we have talked about some other things, and I'm very excited to see what the future holds as far as that goes.
I mean, I'll obviously edit that and just lead with you saying I'm designing another game with Stonemaier Games. That's obviously the only bit I'll now put into the video.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all that matters.
I mean, I think people are going to be excited. I mean, this is, like you say, you've designed a few games before, but this is the first one that's been published. Your
Mhm.
name is now going to become well known around the industry, and people like me who love playing games, who love Stonemaier Games, we're going to be watching you like we watched what Elizabeth did next, like how we watched Jamie. You know, we're going to be excited to see what you come up with next, and that's what 6, 7 weeks before we've even got a copy of your first game yet. People always want to know what's next. the whole cult of the new is such a big thing right now. But I'd imagine for you, that's a good thing because your head's buzzing with all these ideas, and this is just going to be, I hope, inspiration to turn those ideas into the next potential game.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good thing. It's good encouragement to find time to work on the next game between my work in Stonemaier and my wife and I, just the house that I'm in. My wife and I just bought in December, and so moving is always a process. So it's been a very good encouragement to be like, okay, how do I move back out of the I'm in moving mode, and now back into I'm going to spend free time doing game design again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be watching very closely to see what you come up with, and I'm sure many other people will. I've just got a couple other questions that I'm keen on the game specifically, and I know that the game is based on the first 3 books, and so there's a very obvious and open opportunity to expand with the next trilogy that I heard Jamey say he doesn't really want to do until that trilogy is done. Obviously, only 2 of the 3 books are out yet, and I understand that the box is obviously going to come with space for that expansion. So everyone's going to start talking about what's not in the box yet. But I'm interested in knowing about what is in the box right now. And there's obviously a lot of characters in the book, a lot of things that you could choose from. What was the process like of saying this is making the final cut? Was that really difficult in terms of the characters and what you did bring in and what obviously you then had to leave out?
Oh, it was incredibly difficult. We decided the number of cards for each color, and then I just made a spreadsheet of here are all of the characters, and but only the characters that are in the first 3 books. If a character shows up in the sequel books but wasn't in the first 3 books, we intentionally cut them out. And for some colors, that was especially the golds. It was like, that's a lot of names. We can't include all these people. Who do we include? Who do we not?
Yeah.
And then for some of the other colors, I think by the time we get to book 4, there is at least one named character of every single color. I think in book 3 that wasn't the case yet. So there are, and I think everyone's seen at this point, there are some cards that are generic roles in that color rather than being a specific name. And I think if we'd had the option to do every single name, we would have. But then, so it was kind of a process in both directions, where it was like, okay, what do we do with the ones where we don't have enough names?
Yeah.
And then how do we handle all of these amazing gold characters? And in some cases, there was combining. So, for example, we have a gold character who's just called the Howlers. And that was, I'm sure some people will be disappointed to not see the specific named characters, but we couldn't include everyone.
Absolutely. Well, not until the expansions, right? I mean, I guess it ends up a bit like Wingspan, where you know the Wingspan expansions do more than just cards, but obviously a big part of both those expansions is here's a bunch more cards, and people just love that. That is a very easy thing that you could do with this. If people want more characters, if people want more cards, it's an easy process to do it. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much about expansions because the game's not even launched yet. But the goal of the new is taking over me. So back to the day to day for you now. After the I'd imagine huge high of last week when it was first announced and your name started getting banded around as co-designer of this, I'm guessing things have settled down a little bit now. What does the next 6 weeks or so look like to you? The runway from now to people like me getting hands on the copy and it being out there in the world. What does your world look like now?
Yeah, as far as Red Rising goes, it's logistics. It's all logistics. It's as I'm sure you're fully aware, international freight shipping is complicated right now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of figuring out. Okay, when are we actually going to have the games at our warehouses? How long is this taking? What happens if Australia, which is a lot closer to China, and isn't having as many delays as, say, the US or the UK, they get their games, and then but that doesn't mean we actually have the games everywhere else. So, for example, we haven't announced the street date, and part of that is just, well, we aren't exactly sure when we're getting everything yet.
You want it to be the same day internationally. Is that the reason?
That's the goal, yeah.
I guess it would be crazy frustrating when people in one part of the world start seeing other people in other parts of the world seeing it. But ultimately, I think as hobbyists, we're getting used to that now because of Kickstarter, essentially. Like, Kickstarter doesn't have somebody like you go in, how can I even this out? They don't care. They just get it out as quick as possible. So regularly you see months differences between the States and the US, Australia and Europe. It's just a thing. So I get why you're doing that, and I respect that you're doing it, and it's definitely the right thing. But if it goes all terribly wrong, don't worry, we're all used to it by now.
Yeah, I think that is at least slightly likely for the pre-orders for the collector's edition. But yeah, so it's managing all of that logistics with all of the companies that need to buy it, and that like the entire process there. So that's a lot of what I'll be doing. At the same time, like all of our other games, everything's still happening. Wingspan is still way more popular than Red Rising is. Yeah, so like right now we're in the process of getting ready to figure out what our Q3 print run looks like for all of our reprints. So that's something that's going on right now. China we're like in Chinese New Year as of this week. So the factory shut down for the next 2 weeks. So there's just all of these other logistics things going on. That's the best way of thinking about my job is I'm managing people and cargo containers moving around the world.
Yeah, of course. On Wingspan, I don't know if this is an appropriate question, and feel free not to answer, but I was having this discussion the other day about how many copies of certain games have actually sold, because it seems to be quite a hard number to get hold of. And the games we were discussing, simply just because they're big names and were of interest for comparables, was Wingspan, Pandemic, and Gloomhaven. And the numbers that I came across was that Pandemic was around about 2.2 million. Gloomhaven was around about 350,000, and Wingspan was around about 500,000. Does that ring roughly true? Obviously, you can't comment on Gloomhaven and Pandemic as accurately as you could on Wingspan, but does that ring roughly true to you?
Yeah, roughly. I don't have I definitely, yeah, like you said, I don't have the exact numbers for Pandemic or Gloomhaven. It's easier when something hits a higher milestone. Like I think Ticket to Ride has over 3 million copies sold on the box.
Yeah.
But yeah. So and then Wingspan, it's always interesting too. Is like, are we talking about just English language copies, or are we talking about all of the copies? And I will say, I think Jamey usually releases when he does his what does he call it? His stakeholder report about once a year. He like last year he released some very rough numbers on several of our games.
So with a new game, do you set targets for how many you hope to sell? Is that something that you do internally as a team?
Not exactly. It's more of how many should we print the first print run.
Right. And I guess that's a balance between not wanting to have loads that aren't bought and wasting money, but also not then having too few that people get crazy because they can't get hold of it.
Right. And we're not good at it. It's a guessing game. And so I'm sure you remember when Wingspan first came out in was it January of 2019? We had like this expectation that it was going to sell fine, but it was a game about birds, right? No one's going to buy a game about birds. It's a Stonemaier game; it'll do fine. And now, Jamey didn't print enough. Not his fault, not anyone else's fault. Like no one knew it was going to take off the way it did. And so, since then it's been basically been trying to play catch up with that game since it's come out, and without going overboard. Like you don't want to let's go print 1 million units and then suddenly we have to store those. Even if 1 million units will sell over the course of 5 years, paying for storage for those gets expensive.
Yeah, of course. And then ordering those over 1 million copy stickers to go on them as well. Where do you keep those? Yeah, interesting. Because obviously with Tapestry, like a lot of people, I'm not going to start ranking Stonemaier games. That would be crass. But a lot of people look at Viticulture as a big Stonemaier release. Obviously, that was on Kickstarter, so you knew how many to print because they'd essentially been pre-ordered. And with Scythe, huge game, big box production. That's kind of just grown over time. And I mean, what you on now, like third, fourth printing for that one now, and it's just developed over the years, right? But then with Wingspan, I guess, like you said, it's impossible to tell how popular that was going to be, because it's the sort of first game of its ilk that Stonemaier did. But it felt different to me to the other Stonemaier games. A bit, bit more gateway-y, I would suggest, which is perhaps why it's been so popular. I've got a copy, I love it and really enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, but it's just a more accessible game. Like when I play games with people who haven't played games before, Wingspan is a regular choice for me to bring to the table, because it's so accessible. So I think when people often debate why is it sold so many, I think it's as simple as that. It's just an accessible game. But with things like Red Rising, I guess you look at the history of all these games that Stonemaier have sold, you look at the numbers that they sold, but I don't know where I would put Red Rising in that. Like it feels to be less of a gateway game than Wingspan, but more of a gateway game than Scythe. It seems to have a more accessible theme than Scythe and Viticulture, but maybe not as widely accessible as Wingspan. But it's got this huge following from the people who love the book. So you sort of add one, take away one, and then add 1,000. How do you come to a number there?
You guess, to some extent you guess, honestly. Like that's, I don't know, like it's our first IP game, right? So we have no context for IP. We know that it's not, we're not dealing with Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or something here, but at the same time there's lots of fans, but how many of those fans will actually buy the game, and then actually add to the fact that we're doing the collector's edition is on top of the retail edition. Who's going to buy which version? That's hard to know. And so did we print enough of one version or the other? So it's a lot of guessing. It's a lot of talking with like distributors and figuring out what they kind of think as well. And then part of it is just how much of a risk do we want to take? Like what are we confident we can sell? And how little can we print without the risk of really disappointing and upsetting fans?
Right. I didn't realize the distributors were able to help give you guidance on the numbers that you print. That's fascinating to know. I guess they've got, obviously, you can look at Stonemeier's history, but they can look at every publisher's history. That's interesting to know. I find this sort of stuff fascinating. Anyway, sorry, back to Red Rising and you. I've got one last question. So the next 6 weeks, a lot of logistics, but let's fast forward to that first day when most people around the world hopefully will start getting their copies at a similar sort of time, so people aren't going crazy, and people start posting stuff on Facebook and Instagram, and the stuff comes through. Like, can you imagine that day now? What emotions are in your mind now as I'm describing this to you? How does that make you feel? Is it you excited? Are you nervous? How do you feel?
Yes, and yes. I'm incredibly excited. Like I cannot wait for people to get their hands on it. But boy, am I nervous. Like there are going to be people who don't like it. Like that is the truth of any game. Like there are people who hate Gloomhaven. There are people who hate Scythe. There are like people who hate Wingspan. It's going to happen, and that's okay. But I'm nervous. Like I want people to like it so much. It's like letting this I don't know, letting your child out into the world and be like, okay, everyone, now judge my child. And that's a little bit scary, but I'm just excited. Like I cannot wait for people to get their hands on it. I can't wait to have my own copy sitting here. And yeah, I can't wait.
Is it going to be a bit surreal playing your own game? Like fast forward now 6 months, and you've got hopefully friends around, and you're sitting there having a nice meal, and somebody says, "Oh, should we play a game?" And then someone says, "Oh, how about we play Red Rising?" Like that would be a surreal thing for you, would it not?
Yeah, no, it will be. I hope it happens, but yeah, I expect it will happen a lot with family at first, where they're like, "Oh, let's play that game you made because we feel like we should play the game you made." And
Who's family for you? Who are we talking about?
We're talking about my parents, my siblings, my wife's family, her parents and siblings as well.
Are they gamers too? Do they play board games?
Some of my siblings, my family more so. My wife's family, like they grew up playing like Catan and Ticket to Ride, but they mostly just play whatever games we bring and think are a good fit for them.
Okay.
My wife's mom is a big fan of Galaxy Trucker.
Cool.
But then my family, honestly, I grew up playing games. My dad was a big gamer in college, like in the 70s. So then he just sort of brought that to the family as we grew up. So I started playing D&D when I was like 4 years old, and yeah, and a lot of those old like Avalon Hill and SPI games as well.
That's so cool. Your dad must be very proud then, after introducing you to this hobby in this world, that this is now your job. You know, you're director of sales at one of the biggest, well-known brands in the industry, and now you've got your own game. It must be a big moment for you and your old man.
Yeah, it's yeah, he's been really encouraging and proud of me. Yeah.
Has he played it yet?
He hasn't.
He wasn't one of the playtesters.
No, we had big plans. So I'm in St. Louis and he's in Washington State. So it's a bit of a trip. And we had plans to spend the New Year's together this year, and that just all went out the window with the pandemic. So.
Oh, that's going to be an amazing moment. The first time that your dad gets to lift up that box of your game and get it out. That would be a wonderful moment to experience. I wish that on you as soon as safe and possible. And I hope he likes it. I hope he likes it. Any of your family big fans of the books? Have you got anything to worry about there in terms of them sort of being super fans already?
No, they're not super fans. Some of my family's read it, but it's not like. Well, once again, my dad is an English professor and was very into sci-fi and fantasy. So like, I think I read the first Game of Thrones book long before it was popular, just because like he was just like knew George Martin when George Martin was a normal author. Wow. So he's had a lot of those like sci-fi and fantasy relationships. So it's not anything like out of the ordinary for him.
Sure. That's very cool. I've got to ask about D&D, because I've just started playing D&D with my family. I've got a 5-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son. And you mentioned earlier that you were playing D&D from 4. I assume that was with your father, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long was that campaign that you did with him? How did that work out?
Yeah, so that campaign lasted off and on for probably about 10 years.
That's so cool. That's what I want.
Yeah.
How was that? Tell me about it.
Oh yeah, it was fun. As it had all of the things that you would expect out of kids. So I had a halfling thief named Sneaky, because that's the name I came up with when I was 5 years old. My brother Jeremiah had a fighter named Maya, and so we slowly, like, as players, developed as we got older, as kids, but it was mostly just honestly just random, go find some random monsters in the wilderness and fight those monsters, roll some dice.
And your dad was
yeah, no, he had this entire campaign plan. There's like he's like, here's hints of things going on in the world, and we're like, okay, what if we go like fight some monsters and get some loot?
Brilliant. So is that character Sneaky, is Sneaky still around, or how did it all end?
It ended as my older brother like started going to high school, and then in college, like, it sort of as a family got busy with other things at that point. And like I say, it went on for like 10 years, but it was like playing once a month or two for a couple hours, right? It wasn't like this weekly 3-hour adventure or anything like that.
That's amazing. I really hope we can keep it up for that long. We've had 3 sessions so far, and my daughter's created a unicorn human halfling type thing called Sparkle. My son is Gimli, the glorious Gimli, the dwarf. My wife,
that's amazing.
It's called Whip, and it's a lot of fun. Anyway, sorry.
No, please don't be like that's amazing. Like that is one thing that I love about gaming as a hobby. It's an opportunity to spend time together with your family, and like on all roads, that is amazing and fantastic. And I'm excited to hear your family is doing that with D&D. I hope that Red Rising brings that same experience to other families.
Yeah, I'm sure. My son and I love to play Scythe together. My wife and I regularly play Wingspan together. It's funny how people of different ages and sort of interests go towards different games. I'm interested to see. I'll happily play anything at any point, and but I kind of always let the other person who I'm playing with choose the game, so I don't want to dictate things too much. So it'd be interesting to see who in my family gravitates towards Red Rising. But I myself cannot wait to play. I mean, whatever the next Stonemaier game is, I'm pretty much going to be sold on anyway, which I know is a ridiculous thing to say, but it's just true. And being of something around this, it fascinates me. Like I said, I read the first book in 3 days, and it's a world that I'm intrigued by. I can't wait to get my hands on the game and see what it's like. And I wish you, Alex, all the best for the next few weeks and months as people like me get their hands on it. And I hope you are enthused by the experience, whatever it is, to go do more stuff. Thank you for your time today, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim, and I can't wait.